Hello, I'm here with Ron Barnett and John Sparks, the creators of There's an App for That, which was recently staged at our Fringe Festival shows. And to jump right into it, do you all want to walk us through what your process was of coming up with the idea and how you initially developed it with each other? Ron, if you want to start.
Sure. We had the idea of dealing with the subject of technology, and I don't know if it was John's idea or my idea, but to use an older character juxtaposed against a younger character, and the older character is not very good at technology, and the younger character is very good at technology, and how their worlds collide and how they can help each other and how they can learn something from each other.
Yeah, so I was the older guy. We went back and forth a few times on what the topic was. We decided we wanted it to be fun. We didn't want it to be heavy. And it also occurred to me that maybe the older guy doesn't need to be quite so dense about technology, because some of us geezers actually do use our technology.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So that really is how the story got started. Then I wrote an outline, I passed it by Ron, and he read it and gave me a few comments, and also got comments from the workshop. And then on a flight back from London, actually, I had 11 hours to myself, and I sat there and knocked out the first draft. And after that, we started working on the score, and that was the whole process, back and forth as needed.
Right. Now, within this story about technology and different generations, there is a love story at the center of it, where one of the characters who will eventually fall in love is not there for most of the time. Can you talk a bit about how that came around, where that idea came from?
Well, the idea just came from, it's so typical of older parents wondering if their children are ever going to produce children. So really it was about the older character wanting grandchildren, not so much about the romance. Mm-hmm. And so the romance was arranged by the older guy, and at the end we're supposed to assume that yes, these two people are going to get together and produce at least one grandchild sometime after the show is over.
And almost every good musical has a love story.
That's true. Now, once you got into the writing process, were there any particular challenges you encountered along the way, and how did you solve those?
We didn't really have many challenges. I think we're writing together. He wrote book and lyrics and sent them to me in his room, and sent them to me, and I set the songs in my room, and we got together a couple of times and just assessed where we were and what we needed and what we didn't need, and maybe how to chop 9 minutes off the show.
Time was the biggest bump in the road. Yeah.
So was there anything in particular that y'all originally wanted to put in the show that didn't make the cut?
There was more material for the ensemble to do, and I would like to have. I would have liked to be able to retain most of that, but in the interests of time, it was just not possible.
Yeah, we cut an entire song. I think that was an ensemble song.
True.
What was that song about?
It was just to be a transition between the scenes, and it was all about the different kinds of dating apps that are out there and how people use them.
Interesting. So was there anything in particular you were trying to say with this show? Any themes you wanted to play with aside from the technology? You know, what kind of lesson do you want people to take away from, or a certain feeling you want people to take away?
Well, I wanted people to take away the feeling that, we can learn from everybody, old and young, different ages, different cultures, and we also kind of wanted to send up the idea that most people spend their lives like this, living their life through a 3.5-inch screen.
I would say that's probably the primary motivation. For me, I wanted it to be congenial, fun. I wanted something that was fun, that also didn't have a lot of snarky kinds of nastiness to it. So much of contemporary humor is all about bad words and stuff like that. And without that kind of stuff. So that was partly I guess that's not thematic, that's sort of just an oblique
Interesting
attitude.
Well, I think you certainly achieved that. It was definitely a very fun show. This is kind of a specific question, but there were several one-liners in the show that seemed to get a reaction every night. I'm specifically thinking of the "You're smiling at me with my own teeth, Dad." Can you talk about how you came up with those?
Well, it's just that happens to be a figure of speech that I've been fond of and looking for an opportunity to use for many years. I don't remember where I first heard it, but the first time I heard it, it really spoke to me, and I said, "Wow, what a good idea!" So I just said, "Ooh, here's a good place for that," because it was right at the right moment in the show where the kid had a chance to really articulate that and mean it, and the audience would get the fullness of that figure of speech. I thought that would be fun.
Was that something from the 40s?
No, it's not that. Well, it might
that
be.
old?
It might be. I first heard it probably after I graduated from college, which was 1964. So
Okay.
that's first. But the first time I heard it doesn't necessarily have to be. I mean, we could look it up in OED and find out where it was first recorded. I don't know.
Sure, but it sounded like, to me, it was something that the father would have said to the son a lot, and then the son was just echoing it
Well,
back
that's
to him at that point.
precisely, I think, the intention.
Yeah.
Sure.
So to back it away from the Fringe show a little bit and just learn a little more about each of you, could you talk about your background with musical theater and some other things you've done?
Oh.
Ron, do you want to start? Some of them, not all of them. We don't have that much time.
I've been in musical theater for 37 years. I'm trained as a classical organist, so my career was going to be church organist. And then as soon as I got my degree, I discovered theater, and I went, no, this is what I want to do instead. So I took my classical experience and my rock and roll experience, because I grew up in the 70s. Everybody played in a rock band, and I just combined together, and it seemed to work out and was very useful for musical theater. And I've always been writing tunes since I was a little kid. Most of them very bad, but in about 1984, there was a children's touring theater in my hometown of Richmond, Virginia, and they were looking for material to tour children's theater. So I started writing shows for them, and I wrote, I don't know, a couple of dozen. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, most of them were very bad. I was writing children's theater in the 80s when children's
start
theater was
somewhere.
bad. Yeah, so they're kind of like little baby pictures. And I enjoy writing so much, and writing musicals is not easy. It's not for the squeamish. There's a lot of heartbreak involved. But there's nothing more thrilling than to put story and song together and see it up on a stage, acted by good actors.
What do you mean by heartbreak? What's some of the heartbreak involved in writing musical theater?
Oh, the shows that don't work, the productions that sort of demean the writers, that happens quite a bit, or cheat the writers.
John?
I grew up near Boston, and when I was a child, which is a long time ago, my musical background was formed by Bing Crosby and the Andrews Sisters. That's the music that I heard as a toddler, if you will. So by the time I was going to the theater when I was a young teenager, I would go to Boston to see shows in their pre-Broadway tryouts. And the first one I saw just totally knocked me out. I had seen musicals in summer theaters, under a tent or in a small theater someplace, but here in a big theater with a 26-piece orchestra and a cast of really well-known people telling jokes and singing songs and dancing around. I mean, it was just phenomenal.
What was the show?
It was Goldilocks, music by Leroy Anderson, and book and lyrics by Walter and Jean Kerr, with additional lyrics by Joan Ford. Lehman Engel, who was my mentor later, was the musical director. And I just got totally hooked. I went home, started picking out tunes on the piano. I don't know why I identified with the composer. I don't know why it struck me that I wanted to be the composer. I had no musical background whatsoever. And yet I wrote music and learned a little bit here, a little bit there, and finally studied music. I realized I really wasn't a composer, and I sort of focused then on writing book and or lyrics, depending on the project or the collaborators I was working with, etc. But I've been doing it actively ever since I was 16 years old. That means it's 60 years. I have a few years.
Okay, you win.
Yeah, 60 years of my own writing, my own process, as well as the work in the workshops both here in Chicago, because after Lehman died, I so desperately wanted this function, this place for writers to go and be able to learn and practice, because that's what it did for me. It gave me a safe place to try things out.
So, bringing it back to right now, can you talk about any current projects you have in the works? What's next for you?
Okay, I'm just finishing the draft of an adaptation. You could almost call it, I think, a deconstruction of Chekhov's The Seagull. And I'm looking forward to, I hope, a rehearsed reading of that in September. So that would be the culmination of a couple of years' work. So I'll be interested to see if that has legs or not. I'm also just starting on another kind of deconstruction of Ibsen's Enemy of the People. I saw a revival of the play on Broadway, I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago, that knocked me out, and I thought how contemporary it was. It was all about environmental issues, and it struck me that it would be a good topic for a Brechtian-style pop opera about how the financial interests can turn an environmentalist who is really a hero into the enemy of the people. So I'm about to start that project with a book writer here in the workshop, Robin Scher.
That's very interesting.
And I have several others in the back of my brain that I would like to get started if I live long enough. So that's what that's all about.
Ron?
I have always several projects on the front burner or the back burner. The two that are, I think, closest to fruition are a show that I'm working on with Scott Guy called Darby and the Leprechaun Queen. It's
Interesting title.
Yeah. And then there's a show that we're trying to resurrect called Manson's Girls. And it's a movie adaptation of perhaps Santa Claus Conquers the Martians that I'm toying with. And a show based on families' travails just after Katrina in New Orleans, using kind of pop rock gospel Creole music.
Sounds like you're both juggling lots
So,
of interesting ideas.
There's lots of things to split my mind.
So here's some fun questions we've been asking everyone we interview. The first one is, if someone were to plop $100 million in your lap and say that this is for the development of new musicals, how would you spend that money?
Okay, I'll go, because I've got a plan. I mean, I already know what I'm going to do with it. I think more important than developing new musicals, people are always going to be writing musicals, but I think it's more important to develop writers. So I'd use the money to make sure that every serious team of musical theater writers that I come across, and I emphasize the word serious and the word team. I'm not interested in solo book, music, and lyrics by type of people. I would make sure that every serious team got at least as far as a rehearsal process for every show they wrote, because that's how they would learn how to do this. It's not just the dramaturgy or somebody critiquing the book and the lyrics and the music. It's what happens in the rehearsal hall. What do the actors do? What do the directors do? What does the choreographer do? What does the stage manager do? How does the writer or the team of writers interface with this production team? I mean, that's the kind of experience that writers can almost not find anywhere. And I would make sure everybody got their fair opportunity to experience that. And then my feeling is the cream will rise to the top. But and I would spend every penny of that, mind you, because that's what it would cost.
It would go quicker than you would think?
Yes, it would go very quickly. But then maybe one of those shows would hit and keep replenishing the pot.
And you have another $100 million.
Right. So it could happen.
Well, yeah, I'm with him. I would say it's easy to spend $100 million on one project. I mean, and if that project doesn't go, then the money's gone. Be easier to maybe establish an endowment where the money actually made money, and you could use the money that it made to foster new writers. I don't know. I mean, if somebody plopped $1 million down in your lap, it's really easy to go, "Ooh, free money, let's spend it." But as socially liberal as I am, I'm a bit fiscally conservative.
So to bring our interview kind of to a close, we'll finish off with a two-parter. Where do each of you think the future of musicals is going, and do you have any advice for new musical writers?
Well, those are very hard questions.
Good question.
They are. We like to close big.
Yeah.
I think, except for technology, we've gone about as far as we can go as far as writing musicals. There are more musical styles that haven't been invented yet, or more fusions of styles that could be used. There's a lot of cutting edge technology that has to do with production that could sex up a show quite a bit. But I think the basic thing that makes a good musical is a good story, and so it doesn't matter what the story is, as long as it's good and people care about the characters, then it would probably fly, no matter what style of music is.
So is that your advice to new writers?
Oh, my advice to new writers would be to not try to mimic something that's popular now, because by the time your musical gets developed and produced, probably 10 years is going to have passed and it's not going to be popular anymore. So you just, write your heart. Write the story that you care about, and it'll hit or not hit.
Gotcha.
No, that doesn't sound very inspiring, but...
No, but it's what people need to hear.
Yeah.
It's what they need to write about. John?
I don't think anybody knows what the future of the musical theater is, but I think it's safe to say there will be a future, because music and theater have operated together since theater began with the Greeks, or I would say modern theater began with the Greeks a couple of thousand years ago. So I don't think it's going away. I don't think the importance of music in the theater is going away. It changes through time. It was commentary for the Greeks. It was, the musical theater of its day was grand opera, which people are still writing new operas. What I see in terms of the American musical, or the kind of musical of the common man that was popular during the heyday of the American musical, to differentiate it from European operettas, which were usually about kings and queens and princes and princesses. What I've noticed in the last 40 years is that musicals are more skeptical, but that's because our society is more skeptical. I mean, in the post-war, I'm speaking of World War II, which I realize for a lot of your audience, that's not the war they would think of when I say post-war. In the post-war era, there was an incredible sense of enthusiasm for the future. It's going to be wonderful, and so the musicals reflected that. I think now that is not the way the society feels. I think the society feels rather uncertain and insecure about the future. And look at the shows that we are now embracing. Shows that have very tough themes. In recent years, shows like Next to Normal, right now Evan Hansen, shows that are about sometimes personal integrity and the dilemma of what is the right thing to do under what circumstances. And I think these kinds of issues would not have been possible in the musical theater of the 50s. But they're almost de rigueur in the musical theater today. And when somebody writes an old-fashioned musical, and a couple have tried it in the last couple of years, they don't do well on Broadway. They kind of either limp through a season or don't even make it through a season because people say it's not bad, it's just not interesting to us now. So I think the future is about the society. And as the musical reflects its society, I think it will succeed. And there will always be anomalies. There will always be that popular comedy that comes along that delights everybody and isn't about anything important, but nobody cares because they're having a wonderful time. But I think the shows that have sticking power that will be revived every 20 years or so are the shows that really reflect something real in the society. And my advice to young writers is the same that people have been advising writers from the beginning of time is write what you know, write what you believe, write the show you want to see and hope that there are several million people like you out there. And if there aren't, you'll find out and that'll be the end of it. And maybe it's not meant for you. But you cannot make a decision to write something because you think it's going to be popular. That's a huge mistake. Just don't.
Right.
I think, that being said, I think there is something in our heart of hearts that wants to be told that everything is going to be okay. And that's why Sound of Music gets produced over and over and over.
Well,
even
hope is not going to die, even in skeptical times. I don't think you could have a successful musical if there is no hope whatsoever in the story. Like at the end of West Side Story, it's a terrible, tragic ending, but the two gangs come together in a funeral procession.
They do.
And you hear the music, there's a place for us somewhere, and you get a sense of, oh, this battle may be over someday. So I think, yes, hope is not ever going to go away. It's eternal.
That's some good insight. Thank you both so much for joining us today. It's been wonderful to talk with you.
Thank you for having us.
It was great fun. You know me, I love to talk.
I know you do. Thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed it.